is Dr. Oz.
Well, a couple years ago, I was working out in my basement, and I was on my elliptical machine, getting my toxins out through my third kidney, my sweat glands. And I put on a tape that I had saved from a year or two earlier by Dr. Perricone. And it was a PBS piece where you began to articulate the role of inflammation in skin health. And as an impressionable younger man, I remember listening to you very artfully describe exactly how it is that inflammation really affects how our skin looks. And, I don't know why. Through all my training in medicine and years of taking care of folks who had heart disease, you do begin to appreciate that folks that have inflammation on the inside are visibly inflamed on the outside. But it was not until I heard that presentation that I put all those pieces together in my own mind and realized, my goodness, that was the epiphany, that the things that we're doing that influence the insides of us also influence our skin. So together with Dr. Roizen, I thought I'd bring in Dr. Perricone, a gentleman who many of you know from his cosmetics lines and stores, but most importantly from his wonderful, groundbreaking books that have talked about inflammation and the role that it plays in our skin, to give us a little seminar in that. And as a sort of added bonus, we brought in Teresa Tapp, who has been teaming up with Dr. Perricone on some fitness programs, and I've got one of her new books out, Fit and Fabulous in 15 Minutes, which I actually read through. And I got to say, Teresa, I think the pictures in this book are the best fitness pictures I've ever seen, because you don't just have a before and after, you have a during picture. So it's like a time-lapse photography image of someone doing programs, and especially with some of the exercises that you try to teach us, you actually need to have that kind of an insight to do it correctly. But let's first talk about the medicine of skin. Dr. Perricone, Nick, what was the epiphany for you? What made you first begin to think that there was some connection between the quality of the food we ate, the antioxidants in our diet, and the quality of the skin that we would enjoy as we got older?
It actually starts back in medical school. We all had to study histopathology. And I was looking under the microscope and found, I was very intrigued that squamous cell cancer is surrounded by inflammation. And talked to the professor about that. And I said, is it possible that inflammation may be somehow mediating this process rather than just be an immune reaction? And they dismissed it out of hand.
By the way, that's from my experience, Nick, that's usually a sign you're on something. Isn't that true?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Followed that and looked at heart disease, and pancreas were inflamed, looked at the processes in the brain, and so went through that course and then continued looking at this. Then when I started my dermatology residency, once again, we looked at all disease processes under the microscope. And I found that if skin was aging, there would be inflammatory infiltrates in the skin, and skin that was not aging, there was no inflammation. So I started putting together this inflammation, aging, disease theory. Now, what was interesting was I said, well, if inflammation is the key, and I was convinced of that by the time I finished my residency, what would be the therapeutic intervention? And I was always interested in nutrition well before I went to medical school. I said, certainly nutrition has an effect on inflammatory markers. Started looking at that and found that one of the biggest offenders are just pro-inflammatory foods. So I went through a process of looking at ways of eating, diet, and also nutritional supplements that would affect the inflammatory process. Now, I want to clarify that we're not talking about inflammation that's visible, not the bright red swollen finger or the sunburn, but the subclinical, invisible, can't feel it, can't see it inflammation that goes on in our bodies on a cellular level. And that was the key. So the first level was the anti-inflammatory diet, and I perfected that over a period of 10 years with my patients. And it comes down very simple. We want to get rid of pro-inflammatory foods. Those are things basically like refined carbohydrates, bad fats, rapid rise in blood sugar, insulin levels go up, we get a burst of inflammation. Sugar is a tremendously bad actor. It not only causes inflammation through the insulin response, but also causes inflammation through glycation, which is not really looked at enough in medicine. Glycation is a process that goes on in the skin. I believe it's 50% of aging of the skin is from glycation. That means glycation is nothing more than sugar attaching to proteins in the body irreversibly. Once they attach, these bonds actually produce free radicals. You have free radical factories in every glycation bond. So we stay away from the pro-inflammatory foods and the anti-inflammatory
Before you
foods.
get to just to push on this, because we have, it's a very, I'm always impressed at how sophisticated the audience is, and they actually, take notes and they understand this stuff. Glycation makes a ton of sense. That's sugar molecules binding on to proteins and gopping up our systems. We know it's a major cause of arterial aging as well. It's what causes diabetics to develop amputations, heart disease, and stroke. And because their sugars are always high. But you mentioned also the insulin itself, if it's at a high level, causes inflammation. Do you know how that happens?
Yes, it happens in several ways. First of all, one way it does, it inhibits certain enzyme processes in the body. that allow us to produce the anti-inflammatory actions of, for example, essential fats. It destabilizes cell membranes when we have a high level of insulin, and that results in an inflammatory cascade. And we're going to talk a lot about free radicals, and I certainly love Denham Harman and his free radical theory, but free radicals only exist for a nanosecond, and they do very little direct damage to molecules. The key here is that when we eat foods that are pro-inflammatory, or we're under stress, or environmental factors like ultraviolet light, or we take in toxins, smoking a cigarette, what happens is we produce free radicals which then attack the cell plasma membrane, the outside of the cell. And this causes a cascade of inflammatory events that goes on for hours and days. And that's the real key here. So you can't, it's difficult for a bullet to hit a bullet. So we can't stop that free radical really that well. But we can interfere with that inflammatory cascade because we have 2 or 3 days to work on that. And so if we look at the whole process of maintaining low blood sugar, steady insulin levels, we can really control inflammation. In fact, there's very good evidence that if you take the anti-inflammatory diet just for 2 weeks, and before you start, you take the usual markers, C-reactive protein, interleukin-6, measure those factors 2 weeks later, tremendous drop in C-reactive protein. So we are affecting those invisible inflammatory markers in the body and therefore decreasing our risk for age-related disease and also the visible signs of aging, which are wrinkles.
You mentioned that it's very difficult for the average consumer to appreciate if they've got much inflammation happening in their skin. But there are tools that you could probably help us understand that might be effective. C-reactive protein is one. We've spoken about that and as being a useful tool for identifying ongoing inflammation in the body. Chronic infections will cause it, like gingivitis. It might also be an influencing factor specifically in skin aging. But what other kinds of tests can someone do if they want to know if they're inflamed?
Well, certainly, interleukin-6 is a good marker. Now, it's not something you can just go and say, I want interleukin-6, but the doctor can have that done for you. But one of the big factors is this, without getting too sophisticated and saying, look, we're going to start measuring, the skin is a perfect reflection of what's going on internally. And when you start with the anti-inflammatory diet, within a matter of 3 days, you'll see such a radical difference in your skin. You have increased radiance, decreased dark circles and puffiness around the eyes. The skin actually becomes more toned. And I believe in something I call the brain-beauty connection. When we were studying embryology in medical school, we found that there are 3 layers of tissue that form all the major organs in the body. And the layer that forms brain tissue also forms skin. They're very much related. Looking at that, I found that if there was a therapeutic regimen we were using in the clinic that had central nervous system activity in brain, the skin seemed to improve. So what you'll see is when you go on the anti-inflammatory diet, 2 things immediately. In 3 days, your skin will become absolutely radiant. You'll walk in a room and people say, what have you done? Have you been on vacation? You'll also notice an absolute elevation of mood, and not a temporary elevation of mood that you get by eating, say, refined carbohydrates, but a serious elevation of mood because you're actually decreasing inflammation in the central nervous system, which changes the metabolism of the cells, increases levels of serotonin and other important neurotransmitters. So you will look good and you will feel good, and that's the real indicator, because what we want people to do is we want to take care of themselves, teach you to be the doctor, and you can do that by looking in the mirror in the morning and saying, am I doing well? If your skin is radiant and your mood's elevated, you're right on. Your inflammation's been reduced. How's your mood today, Mike?
It's pretty good, but I was saying, what does a guy with a sleep deprivation look like, Mehmet?
What's left of me will tell you.
Now, let's go into the inflammation diet a little bit. What can someone do? What's the easiest thing? One thinks of salmon, but what else does one think of?
The anti-inflammatory diet is just common sense. We knew it all along. Grandmother told us, we're going to eat reasonably. We're going to have lots of fresh fruits and vegetables. You want to see bright colors there. If bright colors are there, antioxidants are present. All antioxidants act as natural anti-inflammatories. You want to have enough protein in your diet. You can't repair cells unless you have protein present. And you want to have good fats. You want essential fats. You want monounsaturated fats. Get rid of the bad fats, trans fats, and saturated fats. It's that simple.
Now, Mehmet, as you can see, eats a lot of nuts. He even eats them while we're talking on the air. And the question is, are nuts the equivalent, is the fat in nuts the equivalent of the fat in fish?
Well, first of all, I want to say nuts are a fantastic source of good fats. However, fish is amazing because if we take some cold water fish like salmon or halibut or anchovies or sardines, high levels of omega-3s, DHA, EPA, and they do not need an enzyme system to convert those into an active form. Now, the monounsaturated fats found in nuts and olive oil actually assist the body in taking up essential fatty acids, but we want those essential fatty acids in a form that don't have to be converted. If we're under stress, that enzyme level actually drops. That helps us convert the essential, the fats into essential fats. So we have all of these factors to look at. So fish is probably the best way to go at it. But even my patients who eat wild Alaskan salmon and sardines, I'm also recommending, in addition to that, taking supplements of fish oil, pharmaceutical grade fish oil, so you can actually increase levels of DHA, which is extremely important cognitively and for the skin.
And if someone says, I hate the taste, the flavor of that, and they say, I don't like fish either, can they just get it from nuts?
Well, I think you need a little bit more than nuts, but certainly nuts is a good start. Have lots of olive oil in the diet, but in addition to that, there are other sources. We can have evening primrose oil. I also believe in taking supplements of gamma-linolenic acid, which people say, well, that's, you're getting into omega-6s. There's good reasoning behind that. I probably don't have time to cover that, but there are many ways of getting fat. So if you don't want to take fish oil and you don't want to do fish, then you have to find some other source. And certainly, like I said, even primrose oil is a good one, and there are others that are vegetable-based. But once again, you need to convert those through delta-6 desaturase enzyme, and that's going to be lower if you're a woman, if you're older, if you're under stress.
Now, the other thing one of the things that's new in this book, as I read it, is stuff on cellular regeneration. That is, you go from just being anti-inflammatory to saying, how can we regenerate those cells? And what are the secrets there?
Once again, this is a natural outcome of the research over the past 10 and 12 years. We know that by reducing inflammation, we decrease our risk of aging and age-related disease. But what is the key to really turning the process back? And we get to a little organelle inside the cell called the mitochondria. And this is like a little furnace. It produces energy. And the mitochondria is really at risk for aging because mitochondria has its own set of DNA. And that DNA does not repair itself as well as nuclear DNA. And when you have an energy-producing process, you're producing free radicals. So about 5% of the energy that's being produced in the mitochondria actually ends up in free radical activity, which then attacks the plasma membrane and many others. So we have to look at the mitochondria for cellular rejuvenation. So you'll see the strategies in that book are looking at specific ways in your diet and taking very targeted supplements to rejuvenate that mitochondria. When you have low energy levels in the cell can't repair itself. All young cells are characterized by high energy. Old cells lose energy. Loss of energy means essentially cellular stagnation and death.
And are they losing energy because of the aging of the mitochondria, the destruction of the mitochondria? Is there another reason cells lose energy as they age?
They're losing energy for many reasons. Improper uptake of nutrients, decreased ability to remove waste, and that's why I want to talk a little bit about Teresa and her program, because she actually moves lymphatics and helps remove waste from the cell. But
Teresa's exercise program.
Her exercise program. But once again, the mitochondria needs to be protected and needs to be repaired. And simple things like coenzyme Q10, acetyl L-carnitine, along with essential fats taken at the same time, others like N-acetylcysteine, all these processes can repair the mitochondrial membrane, reduce that activity of free radicals, which then trigger that inflammation. Interesting fact, when you are under stress, and you're talking about sleep deprivation, the day after you get no sleep, you have elevated cortisol levels, and cortisol is deadly. Cortisol is deadly to neurons, central nervous system. It ruins our brain. Causes
so when you say deadly, you mean it kills them?
Kills cells. It thins the skin, decalcifies the bones, destroys your immune system, actually destroys brain cells. And that's because you don't get a good night's sleep. And it raises your blood sugar throughout the day. So all these
So did you go into dermatology because it has a more regular sleep pattern?
That was probably a good reason. The joke is the only night we don't get much sleep is prom night.
That's right. Now, let's talk about some of the supplements. You mentioned quite a few. Alpha-lipoic acid is one that you're well known for. And again, we have Dr.s Perricone with us today talking about the skin as a metric for not just beauty but also internal health. Why alpha-lipoic acid?
Alpha-lipoic acid is an incredible molecule. In fact, I tell everybody I carry pictures of my children in my wallet and then the molecular structure of alpha-lipoic acid to show it off. It is the only antioxidant that's both fat and water soluble. Now, without getting into a lot of detail, you've got to protect the entire portion of the cell. But the outside of the cell, picture the cell as a water balloon. And the outside, that rubber portion, is actually the cell membrane, which is made up of fats or phospholipids. You've got to protect that because that's where the damage starts. If you have free radicals attacking the cell, the outer surface is going to be attacked first. When that's attacked, there's higher levels of oxygen, creating what we call reactive oxygen species. And you just get a lot of stress, and free radicals then break down the fats. Cascade of inflammatory chemicals go right into the cell, interfere with energy production in the mitochondria. So alpha-lipoic acid protects the outside of the cell because it's fat soluble, but then gets inside the cell into the cytosol. Now that's important because inside the cell, once we trigger what I call reactive oxygen species, or we're under oxidative stress, which means free radicals are overwhelming us, we turn on a transcription factor called NF-kappa B. And you're going to be hearing so much about NF-kappa B, everybody should become familiar with it. NF-kappa B is a molecule that then turns on processes in the nucleus that then produces more pro-inflammatory chemicals that destroy the cell. So alpha-lipoic acid protects the outside, gets to the inside, turns off NF-kappa B, and when NF-kappa B is activated, we have increased incidence of cancer, degenerative disease, and NF-kappa B interferes with the effects of insulin. So we have a tremendous ability to control that just by taking alpha-lipoic acid. It gets into the mitochondria. It assists us in energy production. In fact, alpha-lipoic acid is found naturally in the body, in the mitochondria, assisting in energy production in something called the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex. But we can now take alpha-lipoic acid in supplement form, and alpha-lipoic acid also blocks glycation. So it blocks the negative effects of sugar, allows us to take up sugar into the cell. So if you just look at this incredible antioxidant, increases metabolism, protects the mitochondria, protects us against glucose damage, revitalizes the cell in many ways, protects us from free radicals, decreases NF-kappa B, and the list goes on here forever. So everybody should be taking alpha-lipoic acid. And if you're hypoglycemic, or if you're type 2 or type 1 diabetic, it's an absolute must. It protects the nervous system from the negative effects of sugar.
This is Dr.s. I'm here with Dr. Nicholas Perricone, with Dr. Roizen and Teresa Tapp. When we come back from the break, we're going to follow up a little bit more on the micronutrients you take. We're also going to talk a little bit about how sex can generate increased DHEA levels, which I want to hear about because that's one of those areas where we're struggling continually. But we're going to first focus
sex you're struggling on?
No, there's just this DHEA levels. I think I have too much. I can't tell if I have too much DHEA. And we're going to talk about how we can massage ourselves and get our lymphatics flowing through Teresa Tapp's program. We come back on Oprah and Friends XM 156. We'll be right back.
Live your best life. Live your healthiest life. It's Dr. Mehmet Oz.
Oprah and Friends, XM 156.
And we are getting under the skin today on Oprah and Friends XM 156. I'm Dr. Oz here with Dr. Roizen. And, we talk a lot about working out, but the techniques that we use to work out are often fairly primitive because we don't have deeper insights than what makes the workout effective. And not just for looking a little more toned and attractive, but actually deep down inside. And one of the things that I noticed looking through Dr. Perricone's work was that he teamed up with a woman, Teresa Tapp, who started off in the fashion industry and then made her way quickly into rehabilitation of cancer patients, which is fairly disparate
yeah, it's a little
unique. seemingly disconnected fields, and then developed a series of exercise programs while working with these individuals called the T-Tapp program, which she describes in her new book, Fit and Fabulous in 15 Minutes. And Teresa, thanks for joining us today. Can you help us a little bit understand exactly how the programs that you're using generate lymphatic drainage, and how that may actually impact on the health of the folks you're trying to help?
Sure. When I first started off in school, I was wanting to be a physician and cure cancer because my mom had died when I was 6 years old. So I learned at a young age the importance of what's inside reflecting outside in the way of medications and in health, and that movement mattered. I really didn't plan on getting into the fashion world, but that just kind of evolved. And it's because I have this eye of picking out, and I can tell how one is going to age. Because the way you move does affect the way you age. A lot of people don't see it. Traditional approach to exercise, so much as for calorie expenditure or to aerobically condition the heart, or to get the outside of the body to look better, lose inches, look better, feel better. I've always approached exercise more as muscle movement, as a preventative wellness. Okay, and a lot of that is because of working initially with the cancer patients. I was helping them offset the side effects of the necessary medications that they were needing to take to kill the bad, which also killed the good, which then, if you're familiar with, as your listeners, of anyone who's gone through cancer, they end up with lymphedema, the swelling of the tissue. They have nausea. They look very gray. Their skin, there's a lot of things on the inside of their body that's starting to break down due to these very strong medications. And so these series of movements, and I understand the lymphatic system not only from my mother and from formal education, but I also have a situation where I've had a lump in my right armpit that everyone thought I was going to die at age 33. Well, I'm turning 50 this year and I'm still kicking. So, but what was interesting is I helped everyone offset the side effects, get it to where they're not only that their lymphatic system started to move and have less swelling of the tissue, their T cells started to increase. And that's something that eventually I want to get back to and substantiate. But the positive for the women especially, and the men going through, when your hair falls out, is all of a sudden they were losing inches very quickly. When you have so many negatives, when all of a sudden within a matter of a week you lose an inch off your waist or hips and your skin starts to tighten and tone, you get a positive to focus on.
So Teresa, help me understand what it is about the program that lets that happen. It's not just lymphatic drainage, I gather. And by the way, the lymph, for everybody, is the garbage disposal system of the body. It's when the blood is taken into the tissues by the arterial system, it doesn't all come back through our veins. Some of it's left over, and that's the material, the sort of white milky fluid that ultimately drains through our lymphatic systems. And when we exercise, when we get a massage, certain postures, yoga, deep breathing stimulates lymphatic drainage, which is what keeps us feeling more robust. How do the programs that you're...
Mehmet, now explain, where's the lymphatic system come from? It's around the organs, and then how does it get back into the blood?
We've got two big ducts that drain lymphatics from the legs, arms. In fact, it drains differently from the arms than from the legs, which is, we think, one of the reasons why folks do get hardening of the arteries of their legs, but not of their arms usually. And that lymphatic duct carries the fluid back into the veins and drains. And it's actually it's a big system. It drains liters of fluid a day. But if you're not massaging it or exercising it, then
where does it come back in? If you're a heart surgeon, you ought to know where these things are, right?
There's a junction of two large veins entering your heart. I'm not sure that
to make it really easy for the listeners, everywhere you have a blood vessel, you have a lymphatic vessel. And the only thing is your heart's there to pump the blood. You have nothing to pump the lymph. Only muscle movement can move the lymph. So any type of exercise is going to help move the lymph. That's why walking is so important. Not for calorie expenditure, but for the lymphatic movement. And I like to tell people it's your calf muscle that's the heart muscle of your lymph system. And that's why even by the age of 20, you start to see people get swollen hands and swollen feet by the end of the day. It's because their lymphatic system is not being very healthy, so it starts to pool out to the ends of the extremities because there's nothing to move it back. So when you were saying earlier about how does this compare with other exercise, most exercise is isotonic, which means it's one attachment to the belly of the muscle, which is great when you're doing weight training or traditional movement and you want to get those bulges in the right place, especially men who want to have the cuts and the rips. Okay, but a lot of times you hear Pilates style or yoga or dancers who want long, lean muscles or gymnasts. Okay, and you'll hear oftentimes that a gymnast can outperform a weight trainer in arm wrestling because they have greater strength because they've developed more of their muscle full fiber. That's what I used with creating in Tapp is that, yes, it's for lymphatic, but I'm wanting greater neurokinetic connection, more from the brain to the muscle, just like Dr. Perricone was saying earlier, which is an anti-aging factor, but it also gives you more bang for your buck, more calorie expenditure, more effective fat burning when you use more muscle. If you use more fiber activation, more nerve stimulus from the brain to the muscle, doesn't it make sense? You're going to have greater energy, which then is going to burn more sugar, which then in turn burns more fat because you're using more of your muscle. So in Tapp, I always use comprehensive compound muscle movement, which means comprehensive, it's from the origin to the insertion, full fiber. You're using the full length of your muscle. And also, in addition to the full fiber, you're always going to use compound muscle activation, which is 5 to 7 muscles at the same time. So you're getting isometric activation. You hear that, where you tighten your muscles. At the same time, you're moving large muscle movement. So like you're keeping your muscles tight while you go through a range of muscle movement. So when you do this and you add another factor, which is leverage isometrics, okay, here's how you increase, just like Dr. Perricone said, increase the nerve stimulus. Like everyone listening right now, if I said stand up, or lift your ribs to get proper body alignment because everything centers on the spine. Now you just unkinked your hose, your spinal column, because many of us are taking metabolic enhancements or pills when in all they have to do is stand a little straighter and they won't get posture pudge because they're kinking the hose of the nerve stimulus that goes to their body so they're not as efficient metabolically. Okay, now that your ribs are up and you're standing up, if I tell you right now, everyone, tighten the muscles in your back. Tighten. Hold it tight. 2, 3, 4. Okay, depending on one's health.
And while they're driving in the car, we want you to pay attention to what you're on the road, but you can do this while driving a car.
I like to say do it when you're at the stop sign. A little safer on that part. But now feel the difference when you add leverage isometrics by increasing the nerve stimulus, so like your thumb. So everyone out there on the same thing, the ribs are up, you're sitting tall. Put your thumb just at your back, down about where the hip is. Okay, the ribs are up, you're tall. Okay, now, before we do it, I want everyone to feel this. Tighten on your own. Tighten. 2, 3, 4. Now relax. Now we're going to push the thumb. Ready? And it's push. 2, 3, 4. Feel how many more muscles activated in your back. You increased a nerve stimulus of your thumb, which is a strong stimulus. Now you activated more muscles along the pathway from the spine out to the extremities. Now imagine this done in a sequence. Okay, when you use sequence and large muscle movement at the same time of comprehensive use, you're going to fatigue in layers, layer by layer from the inside out, which is going to give you faster results from the outside in. So now comes to the lymphatic. Since muscles move lymph, doesn't it make more sense if you're using a half fiber isotonic muscle movement versus a full fiber? It's like wringing the towel. You're taking your muscles and squeegeeing out all of the toxins, all of the waste material, all that inflammation and free radicals back into your lymphatic system, which will circulate back up. And the key factor in Tapp that's different than the two major ducts that you were talking about at the groin and the armpit is it involves the thoracic. The thoracic duct in the mid-spine, which again, due to so much poor posture and posture pudge, we totally inactivate those muscles. When you get it up and move in twisting of the torso at the same time in all planes of movement, you're effectively helping to get it from the bottom of your feet back up through filtered and again up at the neck back in to circulate through. It's all about understanding how to use your body as a machine. That's why Tapp's more than a workout. It's an educational program. That's why I'm so excited to be here today, because all of you, in addition to be my peers, is that you guys educate. You've made it to where everyone out there understands more about how their body works so they can take a proactive approach in their own health. Well, so I'm not looking to replace exercise. Tapp is complementary to all forms of exercise because it's more than just a workout. You understand the muscle activation techniques to apply to your favorite yoga, step class, or weight training. Now you will maximize the muscle movement so you don't have to do as many reps or add weight. I haven't done weights for over 28 years, and I'm pretty fit and firm and have the muscle density and bone density, they said, of a 35-year-old. I love that understanding of my real age. Okay, so, but what's interesting, and that's why Dr. Perricone did say in his new book, is that this is the way you build bone density, is to make sure your muscles are tugging on the bone. Okay, we may not have the time to get to the gym to do it. Why not do it while we're shopping and walking throughout the day? Proper posture. You learn within Tapp how to activate at both the origin and the insertion while you're pushing the grocery cart, cart as you're going down. Can't talk quite too big. So, and it's like then you become empowered to understanding that this type of muscle movement, okay, which is done throughout the day 24/7, muscle activation techniques enable you to keep your sugar down, your insulin down, which helps you keep your hormones in balance. All of that adds into it.
Teresa, you mentioned in the book that you can actually drop blood sugar levels quite dramatically with the technique.
Tremendously.
Is that different from how, if you're doing an aerobics class, would you not drop your blood sugar as well?
It's even more comprehensive in Tapp because Tapp involves the lymphatic comprehensive use of lymphatic, which is not only pumping toxins, it's moving liquefied fat throughout your whole body to turbocharge all of your muscles' ability to keep burning energy, which then helps it burn and control even more, okay? It also rebuilds that mitochondria because if you're increasing neurokinetic connection, okay, like we did with the thumb, but you progressively increase this without the acupressure because you can hold the isometric activation because you've rebuilt that nerve transmission. So your mitochondria and the mind to muscle. Neurokinetic means neurologically the brain to the kinetic, which means muscle. So I call mind to muscle with full fiber activation. So it all comes into play. So when you use body alignment, okay, that's all centered on the spine, combined with comprehensive and compound muscle activation and lymphatically pump at the same time, you're just helping your body help itself maximize its own muscle mechanics to make that blood sugar get down quicker, much quicker.
When did you meet Teresa?
Actually, I actually met Teresa through my publisher, Random House. However, through reading, and she's done many columns, I became very interested in it. And one of the problems I have with my patients when they start exercising is they tend to over-exercise. Now, if you exercise more than 30 minutes a day, you're going to be raising levels of cortisol. You're also overwhelming your endogenous antioxidant system. So I was looking for ways of actually getting muscle metabolic activity because that lowers blood sugar and lowers insulin without having the stress factors go up. And that's exactly how this Tapp works, is that you're activating a full muscle. You're utilizing the glucose in your system. but you're not elevating levels of stress hormones, which tend to counteract that. So it's kind of a unique, really. I think the reason that, and I don't have data for this, but the reason we're dropping that blood sugar so quickly is you're not getting the compensatory mechanisms of epinephrine and cortisol along with the exercise because you're stationary. And so the blood sugar drops very, very rapidly. And I think it's great because you don't need a lot of room. You don't have to drive to the gym. It's amazing. You know, we just have to learn something in terms of everything we do, and that's called moderation, whether it's our diet or our exercise. And, you know, Americans have problems with moderation. And I go to the gym, and I just look at these people. They're on the treadmill. They're working out 45 minutes to an hour, and then they go do their weights for an hour, hour and a half. And these people have raised cortisol levels. Blood sugar goes up. They put a lock on their body fat because you lock up the enzyme system with high insulin. And they can't understand why they can't get rid of abdominal fat. You know, the receptors in the abdomen and the fat for cortisol. And so with moderation, whether it's the Tapp system or it's a moderate cardiovascular, I do believe in weight resistance, you want to have metabolically active muscles because that's really controls blood sugar and insulin.
Could we go and try, Teresa, and describe one of the exercises someone could do in the car that you started to? Let's do a specific on how they activate, because it relates to, so that we give someone something really useful to do today.
And there's a lot that you can do without seeing, because we give like unlimited coaching anybody who comes aboard on Tapp by phone. It's amazing how much you can do by phone. But a lot of upper body osteoporosis, which is rampant, is because of that poor posture. When you slouch in front of the computer, we're all sitting up now, while we're driving or sitting at a desk or watching TV, we so often allow the upper body to slump, which inactivates the muscles on the upper spine, which if you have inactivity, you lose the stimulus to build more bone. So ribs up, so even while you're driving or sitting at your desk.
So let's give some specific instructions to someone. Let's pretend they're the driver.
So number one is, like, I want you to sit to where you have your ribs up, your shoulders and hips are in alignment. Okay, now, most people are traps dominant. Their shoulders hold tension, and they usually build those muscles stronger in comparison to their lats, which are the muscles on the side of the back. Both of those muscles attach at the shoulder joint. And an over-dominant trap can add to things like rotator cuff. I mean, everything on Tapp is very rehabilitative. So let's do a comparison, traditional versus Tapp on a backwards shoulder roll to get rid of some of that tension throughout the day. Okay, so ribs are up, shoulder roll up and back. To and back. Okay, everybody out there, feel what muscles are being activated. Now that is 4. Now let's do it the Tapp way. Get your palms up, and now twist your thumbs back as far as you can. Lift ribs, and you have to come down the sides of your body so that you can twist them back, which is twisting your shoulder joint back, which just activated all of the muscles in your back. So if you're sitting in close, bring out to the side like this, palms up. So from here, you have it to where you keep your thumbs back as far as you can. Now reach again, shoulder up and back. Crack and crunch. You feel more muscles activated as you're going back. You have to keep the thumb back as far as you can. So I tell a lot of people that if you would just do 4 shoulder rolls going backwards 4 times a day, within 2 weeks you're going to see less fat at that pudge at the base of the neck, which then over time turns into a dowager's hump. Because a dowager's hump not only allows the bones to start to compress due to the poor stimulus, well, if something's inactive, that's where you store fat.
So we only want people to do this at the stop sign. Turn your thumbs out as far as you can and roll your shoulders 4 times a day.
Well, best at a desk or at TV as well. Do something while you're watching TV.
This is Dr. Oz. I'm here with Teresa Tapp, who's just teaching us about how to avoid rotator cuff injuries, although I feel a little tinge right now on mine, Mike. Dr. Roizen, Dr. Perricone. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about how sleep and sex can affect our longevity and get some more details on antioxidants and how our skin appearance will change according to it. When we come back on Oprah and Friends, XM 156. We're here at Jazz and Lincoln Center.
Now back to Dr. Mehmet Oz.
Back. This is Dr. Oz. I'm here with Dr. Roizen. We have Teresa Tapp, who Nicholas Perricone has kindly spoken about in the past, and I'll quote him: "It takes a preventive, rehabilitative approach to fitness, stabilizes joints while helping to build stronger bones and a healthier cardiovascular system," which is a nice phrases to use. Her exercises appear simple, but each involve 5 to 7 muscles, which each fully activated at both ends, focuses on spine for better alignment and bone density, and finally it teaches you to use your body as a machine. In the middle of this segment, we're going to go through another exercise with Teresa. But first, Nick, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about an interesting element of your book, which is called Dr. Perricone's 7 Secrets to Beauty, Health, and Longevity. You've got several books. I think you have 5 New York Times bestsellers. Is that right?
That's correct.
Or did I lose track? It's a pretty impressive compilation of work, and all of them have have material that's influential to the medical community as well in helping us think differently about the aging process. But one element that we focus on sometimes is sex, but we don't think about it often in its rejuvenative fashion. And you comment that more sex results in more DHEA. Help us understand what DHEA is as a precursor to steroids, and then how sex influences it.
Well, look at DHEA as kind of like a precursor hormone for many of the hormones produced in our bodies. And physicians have noticed a correlation of DHEA levels and general health and actually your susceptibility to disease. So there's an inverse correlation. Higher DHEA levels, the healthier the person. Now, does that mean that supplementing DHEA will decrease your risk of disease? That's questionable. We do know there's a link. Now, a good sex life results in activation of the neuroendocrine system, and there are feedback mechanisms in the body. So we know that testosterone is certainly responsible for libido. DHEA is extremely important in terms of having higher levels for health. And when we have active sex life, that whole system works together. The hypothalamic pituitary system starts elevating levels of testosterone and DHEA production, which is healthier for us. But sex has many benefits, and it actually enhances the effects of the immune system, increases circulation, and also the psychological benefits are enormous. I mean, these endorphins that are produced are extremely important. We know that just touch and any kind of intimacy actually increases your ability to have a longer and healthier life. So sex is extremely important. And then in my PBS special, I joke a little bit, but actually I said, men, you owe me for this one, but sex can actually relieve headache. So there are many benefits.
Underscore that. Do you take DHEA?
Actually, I do not supplement with DHEA, and I'm a little concerned about the fact that DHEA is actually available in health food stores because people will supplement without getting baseline levels. And, DHEA, if you're taking a lot of it, men can convert that to estrogen, and that is not a good thing. It increases your risk of cancer and also increases your body fat. Now, I think that DHEA supplementation can be a good thing if you're seeing your healthcare professional. You get baselines, you get into a therapeutic level if you're low. And hormone supplementation, I think, is really important. I think it's the future. We've seen the disaster of HRT in women using synthetic hormones, but I believe that the future of anti-aging will be we call physiologic supplementation with natural hormones, and DHEA is an important one.
How about things like growth hormone? Because Mike and I have spent a lot of time reading about this recently, and it is a foundation of much of anti-aging medicine. Yet growth hormone supplementation, with the exception of one major article that we're all aware of, that's published about 10 years ago, hasn't been shown to be as effective in preventing aging as most would have hoped.
Certainly with the first article in New England Journal of Medicine, it sounded like the absolute miracle. We took these aged men who had almost no detectable levels of human growth hormone, supplemented them, and over a period of a few months, we reversed the aging process by 20 years, decreased body fat, increased bone density, increased cognitive function, better immune system. Yet when we prolonged those studies, we extended those, we found out we got into trouble. Carpal tunnel syndrome, symptoms of type 2 diabetes showing up. So what was the answer? Well, we believe that, first of all, that supplementation was too high. You always want to go physiologic levels with supplementation.
Physiologic means what's normally in the body.
What's normally in the body. And you want to, so it's a complex system because you just cannot supplement one hormone without affecting the entire endocrine system. So it has to be a global approach. I think the anti-aging physicians are using smaller doses more frequently. I think they've gathered a lot of data. The problem is there's informally hundreds of thousands of people on growth hormone supplementation. The data that's being collected is informal. So we don't have great statistics, but it looks as if those people who are supplementing at the right dose on a regular basis actually have decreased risk for many of the age-related diseases, but we're still not there. And it needs to be formalized. So if the physicians who are working in anti-aging medicine can have a data collection system that's very, very good, we can accelerate this whole process. But it's very controversial.
Why do you think we're having such a difficult time pulling together some of that data? The same, by the way, is true for bioidentical hormones. A lot of the small pharmacies that formulate these products. And we had Suzanne Summers on recently, and she makes a very cogent argument about why we ought to be giving these things a chance. But the reality is we don't have the data, and it is difficult. Physicians are like cats anyway; it's hard to hurt us. But it is something that we're going to have to do, or else it's going to be pushed around back and forth between organized medicine and anti-aging medicine, and never reach the kinds of Main Street application that many of us think may actually be valuable.
I think that's the problem. It hasn't become mainstream, and therefore the anti-aging physicians seem to be at the periphery. And because of the controversy, the mainstream medicine said we don't think supplementation is there, but we need to start gathering this information. We have the baby boomers who are now reaching that point. And Our healthcare system will completely destroy the economy if we do not go to preventive medicine. And I think that hormone supplementation, properly approached, can prevent a lot of the age-related diseases that we're seeing. Most of the money spent in the system, Medicare, is in the last 8 or 9 months of our lives. So we need to start approaching a preventive medicine, and this is critical.
Let me hit you with a couple of real quick topics. Caroluma fimbriata. It sounds like a wonderful pasta dish at a nice Italian restaurant. You argue that it helps us lose weight and keep it off. What is it?
Caroluma is actually a cacti from India, and it's been around for hundreds of years. And the older tribals would actually take some of this cactus in chunks, put it in a little bag, and carry it with them because they had no food on these hunting trips. And by chewing on the cactus, they can go for a couple of days without eating. It suppresses appetite, yet raises energy levels and inhibits a whole bunch of enzymes everywhere from the citric acid cycle onto just fat storage. I came across it. It's extremely safe. There's even a pretty good article on the FDA website about the safety of Caroluma. But when my patients are taking Caroluma twice a day, they report definite suppression of appetite, higher energy levels. If they're exercising, they put on muscle mass more quickly. And there's a lot of reasons for this without getting into a lot of detail, but it does affect insulin levels, our ability to put on muscle, blood sugar control, and prevention of fat, and also acceleration of mobilization of fat for energy. So I'm really enthusiastic about Caroluma.
Kifit and yogurt.
Very important. We need to get calcium from food sources. And there's lactoferrin in these, and the lactoferrin also helps increase bone density. One of the huge problems, and Teresa was talking about this, is osteopenia and osteoporosis. And so we need a preventive approach. But if we have good sources of calcium like kefir and yogurt, in addition, we need to get enough vitamin D. As a dermatologist, I am guilty of telling everybody to stay out of the sun completely. And when you stay out of the sun completely, you become vitamin D deficient. And for some reason, vitamin D made on the skin is more efficient in terms of increasing bone density than taking vitamin D supplements or getting it from your diet. So I'm recommending, and I'll probably be tarred and feathered by the dermatologic community, about 15 minutes a day of unprotected sun exposure. Because we may decrease the incidence of basal cell cancer, which is readily treatable, but osteopenia and osteoporosis is a real danger to us. Vitamin K2. We've all heard about vitamin K. K2 is amazing. It actually can take calcium out of the arteries, deposit in the bones. So we want to get good source of vitamin K2, and there's some great soy products we can get to. And we want to take boron. We want to make sure we have enough magnesium. And there's a list in the book, 7 Secrets, about how to maintain good bone density. Reducing, if you have high inflammatory levels, you lose bone mass. High inflammatory levels, you lose muscle mass. There's something called sarcopenia, which is the muscle mass loss with age. If you look at those people, C-reactive protein levels are always higher as those age-controlled groups who are not losing muscle mass. Decrease the inflammation, we put on muscle, we maintain good bone density. It goes back to the 3-tiered program: anti-inflammatory diet, 2nd tier anti-inflammatory supplements, 3rd tier is topical anti-inflammatories and lifestyle changes. And I'm sitting here, looking at you, Mike, and you're drinking coffee. Coffee raises levels of cortisol. It throws off your blood sugar. It makes you store body fat. And I say that if you drop the coffee and go to green tea, you'll lose body fat pretty rapidly. You'll feel better, and you'll decrease inflammatory levels. I know you're addicted, but it's an easy thing to do.
No, well, I actually have tried to do that. We're getting personal. Mehmet has tried to get me to do this too, as well.
My kids have tried. My 7-year-old chastises him.
So this is not the first time, but the data on coffee, caffeine, and reducing the risk of both Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease is pretty persuasive to me. And those are things I fear more than because I eat a fairly anti-inflammatory diet, actually.
At least I won't know that I'm getting older.
Now let me go and ask, since we had the Hoodia thing a couple years ago, where I guess 60 Minutes showed on it these tribal people eating Hoodia in Africa and being able to go on long marches. And then we found out that there was more Hoodia sold in the United States last year than 10 times the total Earth production of Hoodia since the beginning of time, which meant really that a lot of the Hoodia wasn't real. You mentioned Caroluma. How does one validate that they've got real stuff?
That's a good question. And that's a question I get asked all the time, because my patients, I say, I want you to take CoQ10 or alpha-lipoic acid or niacin-bound chromium or Caroluma. How do we know we're getting the good stuff? And once again, it's going to take a little research. You walk into a health food store, you're overwhelmed with the choices, and it's a real difficult problem because it's not well regulated. Nor do I want it to be that well regulated, because if we bring in regulation of that kind, what happens is access goes down, prices go up. So I'm going to just say that work through, I think, a nutritionist or healthcare professional that will guide you to the right products. I actually have a resource section in my book where you can order Caralluma fimbriata from some very, very good sources, and it's been standardized. It's a great grade. It has the percentages it should have, and I think also I like to use the powder rather than the capsule.
Okay, now what do you do specifically? Let's go. You said you didn't take DHEA, and I assume you're not taking growth hormone from what you've said. What do you do? What's your regimen?
My regimen begins in the morning, and I take certain supplements on an empty stomach, and mainly to control blood sugar and to reduce inflammation. So on my empty stomach, I'm taking chromium nicotinate, I'm taking 100 milligrams of coenzyme Q10 in the Biosolve process, which rapidly raises serum levels, alpha-lipoic acid, N-acetylcysteine, tyrosine, which actually elevates levels of dopamine in the body and gives you more energy, and I will also take my Caralluma at that time.
And then what's the next? Then you eat breakfast.
Breakfast, right.
And what's a typical breakfast?
Well, it sounds kind of strange, but I have broiled salmon, blueberries, and some kefir or yogurt. And then at night time, I'll take the next line of vitamins, which are actually absorbed better with food in your stomach. And so I'll take the kind of more traditional things like the B complex, calcium, magnesium, that kind of thing. And then also we'll take vitamin E in forms of tocotrienols. And so there's a fairly long list of supplements there.
And then when's the next time you do anything?
Again, another dose of vitamins at lunchtime, and then a third at
What's
dinner
lunch?
time. Lunch usually consists of something that's a good. I get a lot of protein. I lift weights, so I try to get 150 grams of protein a day, and that's not all that easy. But usually have a lunch of chicken and salad, and I love legumes. They're fantastic for maintaining energy. Beans and lentils are extremely important. Midday snacks also go along with that, a source of protein. I'll have a couple of slices of turkey, nuts, more fruit, more berries, and then dinner usually, once again, is usually a fish dish.
And, you mentioned quite a few supplements, and I guess you don't take a multivitamin with that as well, or you throw that in as well?
They're actually individual. I'm taking a B complex. I'm taking the various minerals individually, and this gets complicated, and I'm usually in experimental mode. I'm always testing a new supplement. But what I've done for my patients, I put the vitamins in packets. So there's a morning and there's a noon packet. Carry them in your pocket. You don't have to think. You don't have to carry the 10 bottles around.
Right.
We're standardizing the potency of everything, and you will get your nutrients. But I really strongly believe you should be taking fish oil supplements. I take those 3 times a day. So
you take those in capsule form?
In capsule form. And that's extremely important. Fish oil actually changes the way the body deals with energy and fat storage. And you can uncouple something called oxidative phosphorylation, which is a fancy word for saying you can actually turn your food into heat instead of body fat. You can store energy as glycogen instead of fat just by using essential fats. We partition energy. It's the athlete's dream. It's like the steroid by taking essential fats. Increases cognitive function, enhances your immune system, and gives you beautiful skin.
So thank you very much for joining us today. Teresa Tapp, wonderful new book, Fit and Fabulous in 15 Minutes. Of course, Dr. Perricone, well known for all of his insights, contributions, and use of anti-inflammatory therapies for the skin. His book, 7 Secrets to Beauty, Health, and Longevity. This is Dr.s with Dr. Roizen. Thank you for joining us on Oprah and Friends, XM 156. We're here at Jazz Lincoln Center. See you next time.
Live your best life.
Oprah and Friends.
XM 156.